Informed too, because when we joined, there was no music in that school. I think that was just till the time when music literacy in this country was just trying to get established. The cultural music. There were so many the don'ts that we used to be told before you got to join the groups.
To today's discussion with Mr. Kusienya.
Thank you.
So we stopped, we paused our discussion just as we were about to discuss your teaching career, starting from high school. Was it high school or primary, up to the level where you find yourself being a lecturer in the university? Maybe we could talk about that.
Okay, thank you. I happen to be a prefect all my life. Even in primary school, I was a class prefect and I was even a scout. Yeah, for those who may be interested in knowing this, and being a class prefect, those days they used to be referred to as class monitors. It used to come with certain privileges. So it means you had authority, you could influence things to go in a certain way, but most importantly, it was about to enforce the rules of the school. So while I was in high school and just informed to when we began music first term, then second term, I had already mastered the skill of interpreting notes, what we call the sight reading and that kind of stuff. Then I asked my teacher, Mr. Kitui and Ayoma, that I wanted to train a small choir. They said, utaweza? Nikasema, let me try. Then they said they picked a piece called Bless This House. Now, I did not know the meaning of the metronome. I didn't know. This philosophy that a crochet moves at a walking pace, and I had not been explained to in terms of what kind of walking pace.
Yes.
So we were using andante. So the piece comes. So for me, I did not know the tempo. So I went in with my understanding of andante, and unfortunately I picked the lowest the side of andante.
Yes.
And when we went to perform, I realized there were other schools with a similar piece, but it was not moving at the speed mine was moving. And even the chromatic notes, I had not known how to interpret them. But then my teachers kept quiet. Now, I don't really know whether they also did not know or it's a question of let him go and try.
Character development.
Yes, so we got to Kitale Museum, and the first small choir to be called on stage was Kabiefe Secondary, girls. I was in a mixed school, but the piece was for girls. So I coached the girls. Hey, my God. The piece was supposed to be, bless this house, O Lord, we pray, And mine was, bless this house. So a piece that was supposed to take a minute or two, it took 5 to 6 minutes. And the whole clapped. People there clapped. Say, let's appreciate Kabiefe Secondary School. The MC was like, another hearty clap. So I left the stage a very confident young man, believing the rest of the choirs that will come will not beat me. That is the kind of mind I had until the results were announced. I was number last. Why? Because the adjudicator used a very good language that the piece was rather heavy. I didn't know heavy in terms of weight or what do you mean when you say the piece is heavy. So for me, I thought maybe you weigh somewhere, it is weighing these milligrams or maybe kilograms. I didn't understand the concept of the weight until now Mr. Kitui came and laughed at me again and said, but man, you really tried. That was very good. Then he said, weight, heavy, it meant you took it rather slow than it was supposed.
Yes.
It was at that point that an eye got open to other directions of performance on a piece that is written. You don't ignore. Once you ignore any one of them, you don't get all the parameters right. So that was a very fun experience. And as a young man, I was shame-proof. That time, I didn't care what people will say. Because it was such a prestigious thing.
Yes, you were still a student.
A student in Form 2, having been appointed a deputy head boy in Form 2. And you can coach a set piece. These days, set pieces don't have the prestige that they used to have. A set piece. I was an icon. That guy can teach a set piece. However bad it was. I was a king that time. Yes. So I learned now through that, the years that followed. I was, every time a piece came, I would rush to these teachers. What does this mean? How do you perform a pause? Because I discovered a pause can be very controversial. People perform it differently, depending on the time signature, depending on even the schools they went to.
The interpretation.
And what have you. So I developed that personality of organizing a choir at that early age in Form 2. Yes.
So let's now move to the next level, which is you teaching now as, you've gone now to the university. This is Maseno, right?
Yes.
You've studied, what was your main instrument at Maseno?
In fact, before I go to Maseno, I had prepared 2 instruments for my KCSE. I had recorder and guitar, classical guitar. And for the African, I had littongo and ishiriri. Just in case any one of them does not work, I will have something to fall back on.
Okay.
So when I go to campus, my main instrument was guitar, and my African instrument was littongo. But in Maseno, their organization was in such a way that nobody would bar a student from exploring other instruments if you had the capacity and the willingness. So I did guitar, I did littongo, ishiriri, I did isikuti drums. They were the ones I had not been exposed to, despite having come from that particular region, and Ohangla drums as well. So the only instrument that I made for the first time at campus, and these people should know, was piano.
The first time in campus?
The first time in campus.
Okay.
And I was told, this piano, if you have not been exposed to it early, it has a tendency of sucking blood from people. So you have to keep a safe social distance.
So is this coming from your colleagues? Or
yes.
This from your teachers?
No, from my colleagues at campus.
Okay.
So, Mama, have you ever touched piano? I said, no, this is the first time. So, hey, come. I did not know why. I said, one, have you ever touched it before? So, this is the first time. So you move, you need to do. So I was afraid because of, going to lose all the little blood I have in the body because of this instrument. I would rather it stays. So
was that symbolic of, was that to mean the complexity of the instrument?
No.
What did it really mean?
What I made out of this theory, so to call it, was because these guys wanted a space to practice. It was just basically that. But this guy is well grounded in African instrument. It's just coming to waste time for those of us who are keen on piano. It was just that I give them space for practice. It was not about blood and water. Well, they succeeded in doing this. So me, I feared piano. Yeah. Damu kutoka hapana. I left. But later on, when I discovered they were lying to me, because they came with all manner of terminologies that I had never heard. Mara vertical piano, horizontal piano, mara grand piano. Sema, hii nitaweza kweli? So I said, okay, fine. But because with the litungu, we don't have horizontal and vertical or grand litungu, grand what? So kaeni na hiyo yenu. So I concentrated that other side. So I never put a lot of interest there. And I was again like, how long will it take me to manipulate this instrument the way Professor, now the late Kakoma, from Makerere University, who was the head of department that time, would manipulate. A good mze, but here he was so smart.
Just before we move on, for anyone who may not know what a litungu is, maybe Mr. Wekesa here can just demonstrate to us what the litungu is, or this that he says is cannot be grand litungu or horizontal or vertical. Just to have an example of what it is and the kind of sounds that it produces. Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is the litungu. This is a lyre in the category of classification of instruments. A lyre, not to mean muongo, but it's just a name, L-Y-E-R, is a category for instruments that look like this one. This is a traditional and cultural instrument for the bukusu, the tachoni, the kabras, the banyore, and even the banyala. So the bukusu litungu has 7 strings tuned to the diatonic scale, major scale, without the leading note, the T. But for the banyala, they have the T. So it is full diatonic for them.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, so for them...
So it has an extra string.
It has an extra string for the banyala. They have 8.
8, right?
For the bukusus, they have 7.
All right.
Now, the bukusus have some symbolism. The symbolism behind this, the 7 strings, that it represents the creation story. Yeah, that God began to create the world on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and he rested on the 7th day. So
interesting.
Yeah, that's the symbolism. So this is the instrument that I had grown up with.
Okay.
And for your information, I also began learning it when I was in Form 2. Because of Philip, who was in Form 4. And when I got to that school, I got Philip, a 4th year, who was just winding up, and he was also a guitarist, but not to my standard. You know, as much as I came from the rural, but I appeared to be very more versatile than him. Then he was good here, then he introduced me to this. So this is what I went to the university. Nimejiami nayo with this one. This was my selling point. So I could do this. Ekulu wababi ya yakoye, ekulu wababi, ekabo muhana muara ya yakoye, ekabo muhana muara, ekaje fle burunda ya yakoye, ekaje fle burunda, ekaye monina bweni ya yakoye, ekaye monina bweni. Ekulu wababi. Yes. So this is it. And Sasa, this was my selling point. I did not fear. One good thing that God gave me is that I never fear. And you can understand that at campus, there are so many stereotypes that people create. Like those of us who appeared to be coming from the rural settings, we belonged somewhere. There were those who are coming from urban settings, they belonged. So piano was associated with the people from the urban settings, people who appeared to have, who are more knowledgeable, and people who had what I may call now the academic rigor. You are regarded like somebody who has got no intellectual rigor if you are playing an African instrument. Because according to them, what was there to be learned on an African instrument?
Okay.
So that was the discussion that was going. So it divided us in the middle.
It was as though, I mean, it was such an easy thing to play an African instrument.
According to them.
Yes, and it would occur naturally.
Naturally. They didn't really see are there keys there?
Yeah.
Are there minor keys? Can you play a chromatic scale here? So if there is no chromatic scale, then what is it for? You know? And look at the skin. It's dirty. Yeah. So there were people who didn't want to associate with this kind of
African
stuff
music.
because it is backward. Piano was the in thing. So for us, we said, okay, fine. Let's do what we are able to do. You do what you are able to do. But when it came to the exam, we discovered the weighting of the marks was just the same. For you who are doing piano, and me who was doing recorder and guitar, the weighting was just 20 out of 20. It did not matter what movement you are playing in their language. For me, with the Antantino by Mateo Kakasi, I was just there. You play 20. I come with mine, 20. Come with the littongo. The littongo I used to score very well. And I went on like that until I graduated, and I cannot regret. Yes.
And then now this experience is because now I'm seeing there's a certain narrative that's developing. You are coming very stable, or you're coming with a very grounded kind of approach or perception towards both African music or African instruments and Western instruments. To you, it seems what's most important is not it's not what kind of music this instrument can play, but it's music. It's all music.
Absolutely.
Whether it's African from the village, quote unquote, or it's the piano by the people coming from the urban setting. Looking at it from now an academic perspective, I mean, the grades are the same.
Yes.
So you can as well do what you want and what you thrive in, and push it to better yourself. So let's go to you teaching the classroom. You teaching music now in the classroom to high school students, and how these experiences that you've gone through from your village, from being taught in the church, to high school where your teachers are teaching you, and now you are the teacher. You are the one who's shaping new or younger musicians. So let's see how these experiences come together to create a style that is very unique to Mr. Wekesa.
Thank you. It can be a long story, but let me try to summarize it.
Yes.
I count myself one of the very, very, very luckiest children in this country, because I have never taught in secondary school or high school on formal basis. The only times I've taught in high school was when I was a student and during long holidays. Those times you get to this school, you teach for pocket money. Yeah, and when I was also doing my teaching practice.
Okay.
Otherwise, I would be lying to this nation that Wekesa has taught under Teacher Service Commission in any secondary school in this country. My very, very first formal employment in the world and on earth was in the university. And that is not Maseno University first. That was Moi University.
Okay.
As an administrative assistant. And it was after that Maseno University pursued me again. I was among one of the best students, practical students, in the kind of music that Maseno University wanted to promote at that particular time. And that was popular music. So we started a band when I was a student, and I was a very versatile lead guitarist. And in popular music, dynamics, when you don't have a lead guitarist, especially in rumba-based musics that depend on lead guitar, you can't go far. So there had been a proposal that I be retained as a graduate assistant and be sponsored, in that line.
Yes.
But I think the process delayed.
Okay.
So in the process, I was hired in Moi University as an administrative assistant, but my passion was in teaching.
Okay.
It was just by God's grace that at around November, some year, Professor Kum called me and said, Wekesa, I want to talk to you.
Okay.
Okay, fine. Go ahead. Akasema no. If you don't have fare, I can send you fare, but you must travel. So I left Moi University and I traveled to Maseno, only for him to hand over the appointment letter to me. So when I compared the terms of Moi University and Maseno, I opted for Maseno because to be a graduate assistant, automatically you have to enroll for masters.
A master's degree, yes.
So I was concerned on my upward mobility than horizontal.
Academic, yes.
Exactly.
Yes, yes,
so
yes.
I had to forfeit a permanent job in Moi University to go on contract for me to move.
Yes, true.
So you can see. So while there, even while as a student in Maseno, I was training the choir. Not big choirs, because the kind of lecturers we used to have were the likes of Nyakiti, the likes of the late Marco Keyo, Owegi Enrico, Auma, who would not allow a student to do something that even the administration will recognize. So the only area that was left for students to do was ensembles.
Okay.
And that is where I shone. Said, fine. If this is what students can do, I was there mobilizing instruments. These ensembles, and taking them for KMF and getting certificates, which I have so many of them.
Okay.
But having done education, I was taught special methods of teaching music. So the few times I've had to teach in secondary school, and now where I am, I apply technical approaches to teaching of music. But then along the way, I discovered that these methodologies were developed by the whites, and they had never factored in the dynamics of African indigenous knowledge system and the dissemination methodology. So I integrate. Like our African music in most cases, it is just in the recent past that we are beginning to venture into documentation. But for a long time, African music is archived orally. Yes. Orally. Yes, somebody comes and narrates how a story about how the Bukuzos found themselves in Kenya. And so on. And it is valid knowledge according to the Bukusu community.
Yes.
So I discovered that there are discrepancies in the teaching methodologies that were developed by the Westerners. And one of them is that they just don't believe that you can observe something without writing. So it becomes very difficult even to convince an individual from the Western who is really like glued in the what I may call rudimentary methods of teaching music, that you can go to class and teach without
having scored music,
resources like a book, like a what. Then in African society, like in Kenya, where we have not documented a lot of information. Which book do you come with?
Yes.
And begin referring to and say littongo is in this, so you start with this. So what I do is I always improve on the methodologies that they have developed and fill in the gaps with my own innovation. For example, Karl Orff has 3 tenets in the teaching. He says, if you just tell me, I will forget. If you show me, I will remember. But if you involve me, I understand. So if I'm teaching an instrument, I incorporate now observation. I will draw my students close here. Even some, if they were here, they would attest. We sit with them and say, look, I begin doing this. This means this. This means this. Can you even take a snapshot? You can even record this. And after you do this and this, what do you hear? Yes.
Let's do this.
Yes.
You could take your guitar.
Absolutely.
Let's have the case of a first lesson.
Yes.
With a student.
Absolutely.
Coming to study popular guitar.
Absolutely.
Under you.
Yes.
How would you go about it?
Thank you. First of all, I must tie theory and practice. Very, very fundamental that many people may not agree with, but from where I sit, theory is very important because it is the light. It is the one that shines the way for you. It's like learning how to drive a car and you don't want to understand what the brake does, what the steering wheel does. Then what do you do? So for me, this is what I'll do. I'll first of all give somebody some theoretical underpins because it is based on this that somebody will be able to move. For instance, if I have to teach about Omutibo, because guitar is not just in the air. Whatever song you want to teach belongs to a certain genre.
Okay.
Yes.
Style.
So there are certain styles that require a certain approach. Like for example, let me just demonstrate this before I make my point.
Yes.
Twisty has a way you strum. And reggae has a way you strum. That will bring the difference. So if you are doing like a Twisty, you can... That gives you twist. But if it's reggae...
The same chord progression.
Hey. Okay? So I was saying I'm going to teach about Omutibo. Somebody must understand what Omutibo is all about.
Yes.
And the defining features of Omutibo. For Omutibo to be called Omutibo, what is this that is making Omutibo? And that is the idiom. So I'll begin, first of all, to tap the rhythm, because Omutibo operates in a certain rhythm. Say it works in compound time. If possible, we'll have to... Okay, once you get that, then I introduce you to a tune. Like a gospel, Omutibo, the one that people know, that is quite popular. Ulira wanje bane, mundu mulozi, wayimalira abana banje. And then add that in Omutibo music, Omutibo shares certain characteristics with the Benga music. Benga has a characteristic where the lead guitar emulates the melodic contour. Okay? So one can choose to hybridize the two, to combine the two, the complementary, where you don't have to follow the melodic contour and go and just improvise something that can complement what you're doing and also follow the melodic contour. But most important is the rhythm, which defines the idiom. Once you get that one wrong, you will not be playing Omutibo.
Okay.
That is where I begin. So we have just to sit on that rhythm until we get it. And we must also know that Chacacha beat is close to Omutibo, but it is not Omutibo. It is not. Like Kofi Olomide does his stuff in Chacacha style, but not in Omutibo style. Yeah, like so with Chacacha, tateti sisi isikuti tata 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 tateti 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 tati tuta charoni ni wazi tararara. That is the Chacacha beat, but it is not quite identical with the Omutibo. Maybe when we are dealing with the rhythm, maybe in another class we may expound more.
So what you're trying to say is that on your first interaction with a new student,
yes,
the student came to learn guitar technique, but you go to the styles. They have to have a thorough understanding of the styles.
Yes.
Before they can and the tenets or the ideas,
absolutely,
the idioms associated with those styles, for them to actually even get to play anything. Before you even tell them this is G, or this is string E, or this is string.
For me, that is where I start. The theory. I talked about the theory. And the theory, it depends on a student's entry behavior. There are some students who already come when they already know the basics about key this, key A, key that, key that, key that. When you say you go back, they feel you are taking them backwards. Okay.
Entry behavior.
Yes, entry behavior. So if it is that kind of student, is the one I'll go to the idiom. First of all, I have to assess how much information do you have on guitar. Okay? So once I establish that entry behavior, then I figure out where to start. But if it is somebody whom I may call green, fresh, has no idea, first of all, we must understand the guitar
Itself, true.
Yeah, we must understand what kind of instrument it is. We must understand a brief history of where the guitar as an instrument came from. So that is what will differentiate between a layman and an expert. Yeah, my father told me that a layman is somebody who performs a certain task without the theory. But an expert is one who does something coupled by the theory. So for me, I will not go the wananchi way of doing things, of just moving straight to hold here. No. No. For me, I have even to tell you how expensive it is to buy. Somebody might think that information is off, but it is a package.
Yes.
Because you will buy and you will mishandle it. Who and where do you get the information about how to care for the instrument? So after we have done that, then I feel we shall have laid the best ground to begin now, knowledge, to begin to say this guitar is called this, it's not, this is classical, it is acoustic, it is what is the difference, what kind of guitar, if it is about like popular guitar. Popular guitar, there are categories.
Yes.
Yeah, we have the solo, which people call lead.
Lead, yeah.
And I want to give a distinction today,
yes, please,
because people do not really seem to understand the difference between lead guitar and the solo guitar. Lead guitar and solo guitar, they are the same. The same in terms of the role they play. But these two names, solo is French, lead is English. Yeah, so solo means lead. Lead means solo. So it depending on what particular, if you are a French oriented, call it solo. But yes, solo, others will call it lead. Now, in technical music, when you talk about solo, it means a performance by one individual.
Yes.
Yes. But huku, as much as you are doing in an ensemble, in solo means the role or a lead. That's why we say solo or slash lead, because it's about the role it plays. Yeah.